Okay, we're recording.
Yep.
So thanks to everybody for taking the time and welcome. I think I know just about all of you, but you might not know one another. So I thought maybe people could just go around. I'll call on you because I think everybody's squares are not the same. So it's hard to do it in order, each person on themselves. So I'll just call your name and just a few words, just let everybody know who you are in the chance that we have new folks in the room. I apologize. I have a mini split that's acting a little goofy here now. I think it needs to be flushed or something so they get some background. Anyway, I'm just going to follow my screen. So Ty, you have a great last name, Keynes, or an economics chapter, although you don't pronounce it that way. But why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm definitely not a descendant of Keynes himself, although maybe I should do some genealogy. You never know. Distant 15th cousin removed, if that's the way the terminology goes. But yeah, no, I'm just your average typical system dynamicist. I'm kind of an engineer by trade, but most of my work has been in the logistics field, whether trucking or my past job as a production manager at a box factory, where I actually first got introduced to system dynamics, trying to model that system. I failed miserably. I just didn't know system dynamics enough to actually do anything fruitful. And then I kind of followed Steve Keen's work. In that process, I found his software, Minsky, now called Ravel. And then through the years, I hooked up with Steve. I've gone on to build a large national model, maybe in honor of Jay Forrester, maybe not. Probably the assumptions are a lot different. And that has gone on to get me an equity stake in a small tech financial company. And we've kind of built that out now where we're including machine learning in the model. And so, API inputs. So your initial conditions are always updated from Fred and so on. So that's kind of who I am. Everybody here, I know Len. We've talked a few times, might have talked in a virtual sense at the 2022 conference, potentially. Christine, obviously, she's actually helped me through that 2022 process because I had never participated in a conference before. So I know her. I know Mike. I might do a live stream with him every week here and there. Obviously, I know Steve. And I might know some of the other people. How many people are here? Is that everybody on my screen I'm looking at, or is there more that I can't see? That doesn't matter.
12
That's
people,
me.
I think. Yeah, 12 people.
It says 12,000 participants.
Oh.
All right. Thanks, Ty, very much. So since you mentioned Steve Keen, why don't we go to Steve next?
Okay. Well, I'm a non-orthodox economist. I've been attacking neoclassicals for 50 years. I've decided to try to bring out the shovels and forget about sensible dialogue with them. And I developed a software package that Ty's talking about, which was called Minsky, is now called Ravel, and that's intended to get system dynamics into the head of non-orthodox economists. There's no possibility of getting into the headers of neoclassicals. And the unique things about it are the capacity to build system dynamics models using double entry bookkeeping, and then a data analysis section called Ravel, which is a multidimensional data tool. So I've always been working in system dynamics, but I've gone from doing it in straight differential equations to finally using the flowchart approach of standard programs, and now I've added in one more tool, which is the double entry bookkeeping.
All right. Thank you, Steve, so much. Len, you were mentioned as well, so why don't you say a few words?
Okay. I'm Len Malchinsky. I have training in ag economics. Discovered system dynamics, I don't know, 25 years ago or so. Did a lot of modeling for national laboratory system in the US. And now I teach micro part-time at the business school. And I'm still modeling. I retired from the lab. But, I'm working on a project in Singapore, by the way, Steve. That's it.
Thanks, Len. Appreciate it. Christine, you were mentioned as well, so why don't you say a few words?
Thank you, Professor. So my name's Christine Tang. I go by CT. A lot of people in the system dynamics community calls me CT now. And I am a student at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. And unfortunately, I never studied economics under Professor Redzicki. I only took like 2 intro classes when I was younger in undergrad. So I have very little background in economics. However, I used to help Professor Redzicki organize this SIG. And then we handed it off to someone else. And then it didn't really continue going on. And I am a research scientist at the New Mexico Water Resources Research Institute in the US. And I also help plan the International System Dynamics Conference. So if you email conference at, it's usually me. I'm the one who's responding. And thank you. That's it.
Yeah, lots of people know CT in the society because she does quite a lot of work behind the scenes. That's very helpful. Dan Arthur, Dan the man. Good to see you. What's up?
Hi there, and is my picture showing, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, right, because I couldn't see it on my screen. But yeah, well, hi. I've been working in system dynamics for more than 20 years, but I kind of combined it with other things and data science type work. I've done a little bit of work for the financial regulator in the UK. So I'm quite interested in the junction between economics and system dynamics and data science. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Okay, just going through my screen here. Actually, the tiles keep switching on me. Kareem, hi, how are you?
Hi, Mike. Hi, everybody. Kareem Shishakli. I am from IC Systems. We make Stella. And I did get to study economics with Mike and also with Bob Costanza. I'm also at WPI. That's about it.
Short and to the point. Thanks, sir. As always. Who else was on my screen? Say Nathan. Hi, long time.
Now, let me unmute myself. Hi, I probably have the longest experience in system dynamics of anybody here. I've been working in the field almost 60 years since high school, working on the MIT mainframe, which we bogged down with a like a 30 equation model. I have been working in economics, loosely speaking, not academic economics, for a long time. Wrote a book called The Life Cycle of Economic Development as an undergraduate. And actually, I didn't realize what I'd done. Actually, what I did was a labor theory of value model of a national economy, which is kind of an interesting exercise. And then I taught at the University of Nebraska for a while in the management department, independent consultant, worked as a management consultant at A.T. Kearney, and ended up being chief economist of the Georgia Pacific Corporation, a pulp and paper industry. And I've been working the last several years on optimization modeling, actually not system dynamics, optimization modeling of pulp and paper industry with my son, Matthew, who's also an MIT grad. And that's about it.
Great. Thank you so much, Nathan. Good to hear from you. Going through my list here. Virneri. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Hello. So you're mute. I don't know if you're speaking. You're muted. There we are.
Hi guys.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm just I'm keeping my video off because I've been staring at the screen all day. I just finished my research proposal for my master thesis. But I will join pretty soon, and I also need to eat a little bit at the same time. So I'm Finnish American. I was born in Finland and grew up in America. I did my undergrad at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill in economics. Then I had a long winding road, but I ended up working with technology startups and specifically sustainability tech. But I got interested particularly in this big transition that we need to do in our economic systems, as well as our in order to make clean transitions. And that's how I came to find out about Steve. So we've never met, but I was very avid listener in podcasts and doing a lot of reading. And he mentioned actually University of Bergen. I also was inspired by the limits to growth model. And yeah, that's how I ended up here. And me and Rory are in the same flat right now, actually. So I know Rory. We're roommates here at the University of Bergen. And Christine, I know because I got my first like kind of half serious modeling project accepted to the conference in Boston. So I'll be there in August to present in a parallel session about the dynamics of deep tech commercialization. And right now I'm focusing on social, technical, ecological systems, particularly tipping points, and how low carbon technology adoption can create cascading effects in the economy. Very nice to meet you all. I'll pass it over.
Great. When you say tipping points, do you mean what we would call a shift in feedback loop dominance, or do you mean something different?
Yeah. I mean, that is essentially what it is. So you have a balancing feedback loop that is keeping the system in a undesired system state, and then you have reinforcing feedback loops that gain in strength, and they strengthen each other at the same time until there's a shift in feedback loop dominance. And the important thing about tipping points is that it goes to a point where you no longer need to artificially keep the system there. So for example, if you're thinking about policy, you can keep a policy there for a specific duration, and then endogenously you can, once the reinforcing feedback loops were strong enough, then the policy can be removed and keep it in the desired state. So
Great.
That's what I'm looking into.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned Rory, so why don't we ask Rory to say a few words?
Hi, I'm Rory. As you couldn't guess, but from the name, I'm from Ireland. I'm currently doing my MPhil in systems dynamics at the University of Bergen. I did my undergrad in economics, and kind of had an existential crisis about how bad economics was. I ended up looking for alternative approaches that led me to Steve Kane and then limits to growth. And right now, I'm most interested in looking at how the financial sector interacts and affects the real economy. And I think systems dynamics has a lot of currently untapped potential for understanding the complex dynamics of like things like financial markets and how they impact the real economy. So yeah.
Okay, great. Nice to meet you. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly. Yurios, is that correct?
Yes, hi. As you can see, I'm talking to you from Greece. I'm probably one of the two academics in Greece that work on system dynamics. I was versed in system dynamics by my other colleague in the late 1990s or something there like that. Tried to participate as much in the system dynamics society, especially in Europe. Now getting to the States is getting harder and harder. And in the last few years, with my team, we try to develop models. My specialty, let's say, is in innovation policy, technology economics, and so on. So we have developed two calibrated models, one on innovation systems and the other on socio-technical transition on transport. And we're now planning to look at the loop dominance shift and how we can explore that. And I'm also interested in developing dynamic learning analytics with serious gains. We're a small community in Greece. I'm an engineer by first degree. And I loved system dynamics because it's very close to the critique that Tony Lawson has been doing to mainstream economics for last 3 decades. Nice to meet you, and hope to see you in Europe soon.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that. Now, according to my screen, there's one person left, and I saved the best for last. This is the person who's really behind this re-resurrection. Hopefully, we're going to re-resurrect the System Dynamics Economics SIG, and that's Sershin. Can you give us a little bit of a introduction, please?
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Sarcin Şahin, and I'm an associate professor of macroeconomics at Yıldız Technical University in Istanbul, Turkey. Currently, I'm visiting Boston University on sabbatical leave. My interest in system dynamics and system thinking began during my undergraduate studies in industrial engineering. I first met system dynamics about 20 years ago, and I had the opportunity to attend courses taught by Professor Yaman Barlas at Boğaziçi University. Later, during my PhD in economics, I had to work with more mainstream methodologies, particularly dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models, and which is quite limiting. And to be honest, it was a painful experience for me. And after completing my PhD, I returned to system dynamics and began applying it in my research. And over time, I've become increasingly convinced that system dynamics is one of the most powerful methodologies for understanding how economies actually function. So I made it a personal mission to contribute to the adoption of system dynamics both in academia and applied economic policy making. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Well, so Sershin came out to WPI. I guess you ventured out a couple times from Boston.
Yes.
The Boston people will say Worcester Polytech, we're 40 miles outside of Boston. They say, "Oh, you're out west." Which is so you ventured out west to Worcester, Mass, Central Mass a couple of times, and we were talking about the possibility of doing something with the economic SIG. And I was like, well, I don't know that I have the bandwidth anymore. I got so many different flaming hatchets, but I said, if you're willing to help, that, we could probably do something. And you enthusiastically said you'd wish to help. So I said, all right, be careful what you wish for. But here we are. So if I may, let me provide my thoughts, and then we'll throw it open to chit chat and let's see what people think. First of all, obviously, the success of one of these institutions or whatever we are is a function of the membership and their enthusiasm, right? If people aren't interested, or they're interested but they don't have the time, what have you, then it's just really going to go nowhere. So it's really not up to any one person to make it happen. It's up to all of us. Having said that, I think you do need a champion, which means somebody has to herd the cats and say, all right, we're going to meet at this time on Zoom or whatever, and come if you can. And if you can't come, well, we'll catch you next time. If we're going to meet face-to-face at a conference or something, somebody has to reach out to the conference organizers and say, we want to have a session, and here's who we are, and what do you need from me? And so that's what I mean by a champion. If you need helpers, the champion has to recruit the helpers. Email somebody and say, hey, will you please help me on this thing? Right. And that's really, and then, the enthusiasm grows and what have you. There's some sort of positive loop or something that's going to take hold at some point. So what are my thoughts? I'm actually almost finished with a paper. I'm going to send it to the SD review. I call it a blueprint for economics and system dynamics, where I'll lay out all in technical detail all my thoughts on how to properly do system dynamics and economics, or mesh them in a manner that would be acceptable to both system dynamicists and economists, real economists. And so I, look for that paper. It's like 2/3 finished, and I'll wrap it up this summer probably. But for now, here's my thoughts. I think meeting once a month, as Christine alluded to, CT alluded to a little earlier, but via Zoom at a time, that daytime combination that works for most people. We got people all over the globe. We got Greece. Do we have somebody Well, Steve, you're not in Australia, right? At the moment, you're Australian, but you're not in Australia. But
I'm in Amsterdam, so yeah.
Oh, Amsterdam. Okay, right. So yeah, I always have Steve. Ask when I see him. Where are you? What part of the world are you in? Moving target.
But the real economists, I think we should say unreal economists. That's more realistic.
Yeah, I probably misspoke. Yeah. But at any rate, so like once a month at a daytime combo that most people can attend, and we would record it and put it on a YouTube channel, and we were really doing that, as CT alluded to. And then I think the other thing that might make some level of sense is to meet once a year. I don't think that meeting at the annual System Dynamics Conference is going to get us very far, other than it'll be the usual suspects having lunch and lamenting the fact that we're not growing. I mean, we can do that. That's fine. But I think that perhaps the best way to meet face-to-face and start doing things beyond Zoom meetings at which we can present papers and whatever is to physically attend an economics conference put on by economists, rather than trying to drag economists to the annual System Dynamics Conference. But you have to select the right conference or conferences. And so economists organize themselves into schools of thought. You may or may not know this. They kind of organize themselves according to themes, including how to properly do economics. And there's disagreement among economists as to, how to do economic science. So if you go to conferences where there's primarily, let's call it neoclassical economists, orthodox economists, they're not trained to do economics the way we do modeling. I mean, they do modeling. It's just very different. And so it's like talking two different languages. They don't value what we do. They don't understand what we do, and vice versa. On the other hand, if you go to, let's call it heterodox conferences, those economists are not very happy with the way most of the profession goes about their business. They do economics with alternative tools, alternative perspectives. They're often open to new ideas, new tools, or system dynamics is not new, but tools they're personally not familiar with. And I think we got to find a place or a couple conferences and show up there and have some sessions, play some games, do whatever we do. And we have to be open to learning from them as well. If we come in there and say, hey, you'll like our stuff and we're here to save you because you don't know how to really we'll show you, that doesn't work very well. It's got to be a collaborative process. We have to say, look, you got stuff we can learn from you. You can learn from us. We can collaborate where it makes sense. And I think that might have a lot of legs. There are groups of economists that you're probably familiar with who do, for example, stock flow consistent modeling. And you say, well, that's what we do. Yes, but they often haven't even heard of us. Or they've heard of us and they think, well, that's the limits to growth. That was wrong. I hear that one all the time. It's like, how do you know it's wrong? But even if it's wrong, it's one model. It's like, I look at a calculus model and it's wrong. I feel it's wrong, so I don't like calculus. It's like, no. You have to go to the right people. So the post-Keynesians tend to do stock flow consistent modeling. Now, Steve Keen will tell you they either use discrete time or continuous time. Steve uses continuous time. Yay, some dynamics. But, you don't want to show up at a stock flow consistent post-Keynesian modeling conference and say, oh, you guys use discrete time. You're wrong. That's not a way to make friends. But when you talk to somebody like Mark Lavoie, one of the fathers of stock flow consistent modeling, and I ask, tell me how you teach this stuff. What do you do? And you listen to what he does. It sounds exactly like a system dynamics class. So there's room for collaboration. I think there's room for open-mindedness. The institutional economists also do things very system dynamics like. They tend to do Harvard case studies, but Nathan's dad, Jay, would always say system dynamics is sort of a computerized case study. So again, there's an area where, we might collaborate. And then it also occurs to me, somebody, what Kareem mentioned, he worked with Bob Costanza, I guess. He's a ecological, I don't know if he's an economist, but, Herman Daly, the ecological economists, those folks tend to accept system dynamics as a useful tool. So without very heavy lifting, I've named 3 sort of schools of thinking. They have conferences and journals, and they have PhDs in economics. And we could certainly see if we could meet annually, let's say, at one of their conferences. We don't have to go to the same one every time. You get into, well, should it be a European conference, an American conference, a Australian conference? You get into that whole thing, because we don't want the Australian folks to always be the ones to travel or what have you, that you get into all that stuff. But I would say, for starters, so to sum up, once a month Zoom meetings where somebody gives a talk, and then in a search for an annual economics conference where we could convene and see if we can get on the program, have at least one session, maybe do play a game outside of things or whatever, and see if we can generate any interest. So I will stop there. That's just my 2 cents from the peanut gallery. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. It's just my perspective. And let me shut up, and anybody who'd like to chime in and react to what I've said, please do so.
This is Nathan. Response. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, Nathan.
Can you hear
please.
Nathan?
Yeah, please, Nathan, go ahead.
Okay. I would just caution the idea that the neoclassicals are, anti and unapproachable. I remember with John Sturman and I think Jack Comer and I took a macro course at MIT, and it was all about ISLM and aggregate demand and moving curves and shifting this and that. And we built our own little causal map diagram of what they were talking about. And the 3 of us blew everybody away in the exam because we understood the feedbacks behind. So as a dissertation, I translated that modeling work, ISLM, aggregate demand, and various things, into a single system dynamics model. I was working along, it had a supervisor upset, and eventually went to the economics department and ended up talking to Bob Solow, who's a Nobel Prize winning, standard economist. And he said he'd be glad to orient my thesis. He was my supervisor. And he thought it was interesting. And he said, well, why don't you look at this from a linear dynamics perspective with eigenvalues and stuff. Well, that's interesting. How am I going to do that? Ended up linearizing the model and testing for frequency response and various things. Got through. He was extremely helpful. Bob Solow was. I mean, unbelievably. And I think he got it. He understood what I was doing, liked it, and that was sort of the end of that. But I would say there could be more receptivity than we assume.
If I can come back on the same person, Robert Solow is a good bloke. He's dead now, of course, but he was a decent human being, and he's been fighting against dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models for over 20 years, saying this is nonsense. We shouldn't be doing it. Of course, he's had no impact on the direction of the profession at all. So Bob is about as close as you can get to somebody in that school of thought who's open-minded. But he has been rejected by all the leading mainstreamers now. So, and he actually ended up being on the advisory committee for the review of Keynesian economics run by Louis-Philippe Rochon, who's one of the most prominent post-Keynesians. So, yeah, I can understand having a good experience with Bob. You don't want to talk to some of the others. And Bob's, he's lost his influence over time.
If I could just chime in real quick, I take Nathan's point, though, and every year in early January, there's called colloquially the AEA meetings, the American Economic Association, but that's really not exactly what they are. They're really the meetings of the Allied Social Science Association, and the American Economic Association is only one of many organizations that meet together in the first week of January. And there are heterodox organizations that meet there as well. You could imagine selecting one of those organizations and then seeing if any orthodox economists would wander in, find a session interesting sounding, and get sort of the same reaction as a Robert Solow would, as opposed to just cordoning ourselves off at a preaching to the choir sort of conference. But anyway,
Yeah.
Anybody else have thoughts? Yeah, Rory, go ahead, please.
This is kind of in reference to what you were talking about. A month or two ago, I attended the Nordic Post-Keynesian conference, and I chatted to a lot of the younger masters and PhD students about continuous time and systems dynamics. And there was a lot of I'd say mild hostility. A few they concede. One PhD student who's a really clever guy from SOAS in England, he was like, no, I'm pretty much sold on continuous time, to be honest. I have thought about it. He was a mathematician from his undergrad. And I said, oh, why don't you just refigure it in continuous time? And he said, it just takes too long. And then I spoke to a French professor who gave a talk he did a mathematical proof to try and, explain to these people that the economy is inherently unstable and that necessitates complex dynamics, etc. And I spoke about, I was like, do you know Steve Keen? What do you think of his work, Ravel? And he was like, oh, it's interesting, but it would take too long to learn. And it kind of freaked me out a bit, because what it made me realize is that they have such an overhang from kind of neoclassical economics. They sometimes assume that there's an equilibrium, which I thought was kind of nuts. And I don't think they can break out of that cycle. And when they give presentations with their models, I was quite shocked, because I don't have a formal training in post-Keynesianism. I went straight from undergrad neoclassical economics to systems dynamics and have been filling myself in on the gaps. And I was really shocked, because compared to some systems dynamics models, it seemed like they were in the dark ages and also very resistant to change that fact. And so, yeah, I would love to hear some of the older people's advice about how to navigate your way through that very complex mire.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Rory. I mean, it's all very well that if you try to convert the neoclassicals, then you strike the ideological resistance. But the post-Keynesians need to learn the importance of continuous time and overall dynamics. The problem is they were taught mathematics by neoclassical economists, so they didn't learn anything like the full repertoire you need for handling complex systems, and they end up falling back into the same equilibrium. Shock a system and see when it returns to equilibrium stuff. That's the core of SFC modeling. So I think it's actually probably a better idea if we go along, almost like a clinic for post-Keynesians to say, look, it's not that hard to do continuous time, and this is why it's so much better than what you're trying to do with discrete time. Have you heard that equilibrium may not be stable, and that sort of thing? So my preference. I've given up on trying to talk to neoclassicals. I've had too many years of fighting them, but I think the post-Keynesians, they need a clinic, and that's what I'd suggest, going to a post-Keynesian conference where we can show here's a range of ways to handle what you've been doing with your stock flow consistent modeling, and these are the reasons why it's both faster to do it our way and in more honest, more correct in mathematical terms.
Sounds like one of the things the SIG might consider doing is putting on a series of mini courses, online mini courses that don't necessarily give academic credit, but rather where people who are already, they have their degrees or they're in a PhD program somewhere else, they just want to learn how to do it, right?
Yeah.
And it has to be, if you're a student, inexpensive, like $49 US dollars or something like that. At any rate, Urios, you have your hand up, please.
Yes, I'd like to share with you my experience with EP. EP is the European Association of Evolutionary Political Economy. Steve was there in Genoa, I think.
Some time ago, I've forgotten,
And
pre-COVID.
I was there in the front rows, and I looked back at the amphitheater, and you know, it's a diverse pack of heterodox schools in there. I think they were looking at him like, you know, as an alien at that time. I don't know if he got the same experience, but you know, it was so fun for me to watch that reaction. But I think that there is some, you know, there is inertia. There is a lock-in in methodology and things like that. So we need to sort of find a beachhead somewhere in a community where they will be open. And I found that, you know, we have tried at sometimes we had streams or at these conferences with system dynamics. Some other times, you know, they call experimental economics the agent-based modeling a lot, and most of them are people from finance, and they have established themselves as a niche in that community. And I think they would be open. It's very continental, of course, but it's open. It just happens in Europe most of the times. That's one technicality. But I know that it would be quite open, and you know, once you establish some buzz in a community, then you can convert people, especially in the younger ones, and try to collaborate with them on different sub agendas and try to cut across schools and of thought and attract them into working with our methodology. I think that it's one of the arenas where I can think it would be they would be more open to, you know, listening, raising their curiosity, and attracting people to, you know, come and see what are they talking about, these people.
Thank you. Lord Keynes, you got your hand up there.
Yeah, it took me like 10 minutes to figure out how to do that. I was about to leave. My thoughts is actually that we should try, well, a suggestion is actually go directly to stakeholders. So people in the finance industry. So that's where I found most of my success in finding people that are receptive to system dynamic model, as opposed to targeting specific economic schools. They're all rigid in their belief systems, whether it's post-Keynesians, neoclassicals, MMTers, new Keynesians. It's very hard to break through. It's spinning your tires. I found where I do find success is in results-oriented industries like finance. If you have, you know, a model or a system that produces results, you're going to get attention, right? And you're going to get listeners, and you're going to get, you know, adopters into the system dynamic method. So that would be my thought. If there's, you know, some good finance conferences where we can take, you know, models, applicable models in the real world, and present them, and then show the methodology of system dynamics, I think that would have a really big impact. That's kind of my thoughts, as opposed to, you know, targeting the academic realm. And I know everybody, excluding myself here, is, you know, from the academic world. I just think those are all echo chambers, and it's like Mike was saying, we're just ultimately having meetings amongst ourselves every year, versus going to a broad area like finance, where it's result orientated, and we can bring packages or models that show result orientated outcomes.
So it it seems like academic economists aren't really interested in making the economy better, but rather on publishing papers that other academic economists will read and accept.
Yeah.
Shocking.
So real quick, so are you thinking, and then we'll go to Len in a minute here, are you thinking, Ty, of us gathering annually at a sort of a finance conference or some sort of practitioner, or however you want to word it, place?
Yeah, there's lots of you know, finance conferences out there, right? Some are, you know, more ethical than others, per se, and it's a little bit about selling your soul when you go into that realm. But those are where, you know, the real world, you know, results are happening, where we can take, you know, our technique and show it to a broader audience. They might not be skilled in mathematical modeling, whether it's, DSGE or system dynamics, but they're open to it. And I've also found too, and working with a lot of finance people, they got their master's or their PhD in economics, and it might have been a neoclassical brand, a post-Keynesian brand, but they forgot all that and put it aside because the firm they're working for had specific expectations for them, right? So all that goes out the window anyway. So you're not fighting a rigid ideology in their head where you're encountering that in the academic realm because you put yourself in a specific space, especially economics. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. And there's a ton of those conferences out there that would give us a lot of different options to work from.
Okay, thanks, Ty. Len, what's up?
Couple of things. One, Christine, probably your CT, sorry. You're probably the person who started this, but there's a SIG, Economic SIG's website on the SD Society website. And if you go, I forgot where you actually go to get it. I think you go to join and then special interest groups and you'll find it. So there is a practical place where we can interact. The second thing, and this is based a lot on my experience of what Ty said, when I dealt with clients and they used the word economics, that was a synonym for cost, right? From a micro approach or a economic application approach. I got asked to teach some engineers engineering economics a few years ago. And I said, what? What is engineering economics? Well, it's finance and welfare economics, right? With another label. So I think defining who we are is also important. We might have, I hate to use the word sects, but we might have groups within our SIG who want to concentrate on specific things. So I've never done any macro stuff at all, although now we're trying to revive Stafford Beer's model that he did for the Chilean economy before President Allende was assassinated. We've actually found the Dynamo source code. This is a little pet project. Maybe I'll rope some of you macro people in on. But so two things. One, the logistics through the website, and then two, clarifying maybe the niches within the broad area of economics.
Yeah, I think, Len, correct me if I'm wrong, to get full access to the SIG website, you need to be a member of the society. Is that true?
No, I'm not logged in now, and I just clicked on join. Special interest groups and economics shows up about.
Oh, okay, good. Oh, that's
down.
Good news.
Yeah, and then there are a bunch of links, of course, that have nothing attached, but the framework is there. And one warning, the referral section is about to disappear. The society is going to stop referring consultants and things of that sort.
Steve, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just browsing, I spotted a thing called International Conference Alerts. I'll put the link in the chat, and I've just been fiddling around with it a bit. It seems to be a pretty comprehensive way of finding conferences all over the planet with different topics. So it might be a way to try to find a conference we slot into that is, more general than any of us can come up with our own recollections of conferences. In terms of our conference index, and Tristane's whacked another one, or CT has whacked another one there as well. I'll take a look at that. In terms of what I've been doing, one little thing that I've developed in the last few years is a proof that you can derive all the leading post-Keynesian macroeconomic models from strictly true economic definitions, and do it in system dynamics, which only works in continuous time, because only then can you do log differentiation, and that's part of the trick that leads to those models. So I would want to present that at a post-Keynesian conference or a stock flow consistent modeling conference and say, this is where you get to if you forget all the micro shit, and this is where you get to if you drop discrete time.
I think you should present your preliminary ideas in that topic at our first Resurrection SIG meeting next month.
Yep. Happy to do that. I'm ready to roll.
Okay. Rory, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to what Ty was saying about the finance industry. So I think I'd be curious to know if there was like a heterodox finance kind of school or rather more so like a conference, because I know they're a bit more divided and split up. But when I've experienced ideas, when I've spoken to people about this in the finance industry, that I do think like he's right about the idea for sure that like you could have like a boutique or micro fund that picks up these kinds of ideas and practices from SD, then could make serious gains. But problem I've heard speaking to people who have a kind of more post-Keynesian outlook within the financial sector is that like people at Goldman and these big bulge bracket banks, they ultimately know all the stuff in their CFA doesn't work. They know CAPM doesn't work. They know discount cash flows, whatever. They know it all doesn't work, but ultimately they don't care because there's so much institutional rigidity, and they're not interested in innovation. So that's just the kind of perspective I wanted to put out there. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I think the economics profession, as are many organizations, are path dependent, right? You get locked into QWERTY keyboards and the imperial measurement system while the rest of the world uses the metric system, et cetera, and you can't break out. It's just too much momentum or inertia or people set in their ways, what science proceeds funeral by funeral and all that stuff. So it's challenging. But what I would say, I mentioned early on about, having a champion to herd the cats and so forth. The idea of a conference that's not an academic economic conference, that requires somebody to do a little bit of investigative research and look into it. And at one of our monthly meetings, make a modest presentation saying, I've looked at these 7 different whatever finance conferences or whatever, and it could be healthcare economics, ag economics, I don't know, whatever. And this association of whatever hospital managers looks ripe, and it's in Chicago every year, and it's easy to get to right at O'Hare. I recommend we consider meeting there. This sort of thing, right? I just made all that stuff up, but you get the idea. But somebody has to do that, right? Look into it seriously, and then come back to us and say, hey, I got an idea here. Here's the data, and so forth. Okay, how are we doing here? We're doing, if we want to keep ourselves to an hour here, we're doing pretty well. Anybody have any other thoughts they'd like to? Sure. Veneri, if I'm pronouncing that right. I hope.
Yeah, Veneri, that's right. Yeah, just chime in on what Len mentioned earlier. So about not having done macroeconomics, and it's not my primary focus at the moment either. So I just wanted to ask the question, like historically in this economics SIG, like how much focus is put on economics in this group itself? Obviously, I understand that this is everyone's primary focus, but for example, does it branch out into economics to shape policy, policy design, innovation, and these kinds of things? What is the makeup of this group usually?
I don't want to speak for everybody, but it seems to me we can be whatever we want to be, but I'll let others weigh in.
Right, I'm a practitioner now. I mean, I'm not really an academic, except to teach an intro micro course. But my gosh, the demand for the so-called economics being added to our models, transition to a green economy. Where's the economics? And they typically use that as a synonym for cost, although we do supply and demand and payback period or internal rate of return, all that welfare economics kind of stuff. And I've actually found that there are some SD articles that are wrong. That they do things incorrectly in that domain, in the micro domain. So I'm dealing mainly with clients. What's the economics of providing genetic testing in a country? Now, is that a synonym for cost? Well, there's feedback, right? Your neighbor got genetically tested, so maybe now you're induced to get genetically tested. So you add feedback to that model. So it like Mike said, it's all over the place. It's truly amazing.
I certainly think, the macro area has been heavily harvested. Not saying everything that could be done, it has been done, but there's probably quite a lot that could be done at, I would say, the industry level, where you're working with industry groups. Pick one, Nathan, was it the lumber? We're working in the lumber, the timber industry for Weyerhaeuser, one of these. There's just a lot just right there. Just pick that. Nathan, you might want to say a few words. There's a lot happening with supply chain management and transportation issues and buffer stocks and managing timber and whatever. But I'll let you.
Well, I did some system dynamics work and some other kinds of work in the pulp and paper business, and things like estimating the value of a mill. It's a $1 billion investment. What is this actually worth now, given prices and trends and so on? I looked at gas futures of buying ahead natural gas, and it was really interesting. It was mostly a data analysis thing, but I used system dynamics in that. Discovered that the future price of gas has nothing to do with the future price of gas, what it will actually be. It's actually just partway between today's price and the average long-term price. I don't know, estimating the future of old corrugated cardboard, recycled cardboard price, and looking at the various causes from the past that caused change, and then looking forward. What do you expect? Is the price going to go up, go down, whatever? And all that, it's interesting stuff, but it's very specific. I would say we have to be really careful as a SIG here not to take the methodology of system dynamics as the goal, trying to convert people to doing system dynamics. I think that's, in the long run, about as effective as it has been so far, which is not. I think really it's the quality and usability of results, particularly in industry, that will make or break the field. I caution us against leaning too heavily on the try to advise the policymakers and create new policies that are going to fix the world. I mean, you have to remember every policy that's implemented by a government is actually enforced by the death penalty. If you don't do what they say and you refuse to go to jail, you'll be executed in the apprehension. I think people lose sight of the fact that the policy is pushing other people around, and that's kind of an ugly game to be in. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Okay, Saoirse, did you have your hand up? Sorry, I think I saw it flash up, or no?
Oh yes, I did, but then the topic changed, so I lowered my hand.
Oh,
so okay. I have just some other suggestions, if you like. But
yes, please, because we have 5 minutes, and wrapping up, I was going to ask for steps forward. So why don't you go ahead, please?
Okay, so I had a look at the website of the Economics SIG and saw that there are long run goals, and I think they are really reasonable for achieving the vision of Professor J. Forrester's the economic theory for the new millennium. But I think it would be better if we can determine some short-term actionable mission statements, and if we can form some small committees or working groups, if you like. And apart from the general meetings, maybe these groups can meet as needed. And for example, I also thought that there's the economics SIG website, so it can be converted into a living resource for the ST economists, and we can maybe publish some blog posts as you do in LinkedIn. And also we can activate some social media accounts and other communication channels. We can do regular updates via LinkedIn in order to broaden our outreach. And as you said, we can also host webinars and online panels. These are the things that come up to my mind for the short term, and in the long term, maybe we can aim launching an academic journal, since a peer-reviewed journal dedicated to system dynamics and economics could provide a platform for those who struggle to find a place in traditional economic journals. And as I said before, we can aim to develop some high-quality textbooks and teaching materials that can be also put in website. And I know that you are and Professor Said are working on such books. And another thing, this is the final thing, and we can also create a structured online course and maybe publish it on the platforms like Coursera. So these are the things that I can suggest at the moment.
Cool. Great. Thank you so much. So Steve, your hand is up. We got a couple minutes left. You're muted, buddy.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
We're talking too much about converting other people and not enough about working ourselves. I think one thing we could consider doing is building the type of model that Forrester first wanted to build that never got completed. Taken by the Chilean, which is a great thing to know about, but let's do it ourselves. And focus on showing what can be done by using system dynamics without the constraints of all the other approaches that tie ideology in on the ground floor. And on that front, Ty's model, which he hasn't spoken about here, but the model he's put together, I think, is absolutely brilliant. And it's if that's what is getting him to talk to the finance sector successfully as well. So we can potentially show this could be the new economics. And why don't you come along and join us rather than trying to persuade people who are stuck in their own modeling framework and have ideological reasons as to why they won't consider what we're talking about.
So I think we have a second speaker then for for our monthly meetings, Steve and then Ty.
Yep.
Great. So to wrap up, what I'm going to do is I will post the recording to a YouTube channel and send out the link to the mailing list. And of course, please share it with anybody else who wasn't here or hasn't heard about this and might have an interest. And am I hearing that we should reconvene a month from now online for, let's say, an hour? Or you don't want to do that in the summer? Or what's our next step beyond just looking at the recording of this meeting?
I would like to actually do it in a month. I can leverage my Twitter X social media account, which has gotten quite popular, to kind of bring in a few more eyeballs, I think, to make it a little more interactive and bring some more ideas to the table. So I almost think like another meeting next month to extend what we've done here, and broaden it to a few more people with some other ideas, because we are kind of limited here to 12 people and their ideas. So I think it would be applicable to try this again next month, but with a few more eyeballs.
Yeah.
Okay, so no presentation, but more chit chat about where we're headed. Rory, please, your hand is up.
Yeah, just in terms of where we're headed, I just wanted to say that, like, I know a lot of very clever young people interested in systems dynamics with economics, very interested in economics more broadly and what kind of tools we need to understand what's happening. And I think there's kind of a sense like a real lack of knowing or understanding of how they can get into it, who they should talk to. And I think rather than focusing on converting kind of older, different kinds of economists, I think focusing on young people who, because of different life experiences or face the same level of indoctrination into any specific ways of thinking, could bring new ideas. I don't know. That's just my perspective. I'm biased, obviously.
Yeah,
I think
thanks.
you're right. I see a lot of white hair, Mike.
Yeah, I know. It happens to all of us. Yeah, I don't think converting older economists is very effective. Even in my experience, when you talk to them and they say, I kind of think you're right, they're not about to drop what they've been doing for the last 30 years and say, let me, so really it's not so much we're converting people as being accepted by them as we're legit. That, I might not do what you do, but you're welcome here. And we'll take you seriously. And, I'll wander into your session and listen attentively to what you're saying, et cetera. I think that's a modest, at least with economists. So, all right. So we're at the top of the hour. I don't want to, everybody's time is precious. So I don't want to overdrive the headlights here. Any last thoughts before we break? And we'll try and tee up another meeting in a month with some other folks. Maybe I'll iterate with Searchin and Ty, and we'll try and pull that together. Any other thoughts?
That'll do us. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks to everyone for their time. I'm actually quite optimistic that we might pull something off here this time around. So great. So have a good rest of your day and weekend, and we'll stay tuned, watch your emails, and we'll see everybody hopefully in a month.
Okay.
Thank
Bye
you,
all.
Mike.
Okay. Thanks,
right.
Mike.
Bye, everybody.
Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye bye.
Yeah.